in the heart of San Francisco. Amidst the bustling streets and vibrant colors of the San Francisco market, there was a sight that stood out on a bright Saturday morning. A young girl, no older than 5, was walking hand in hand with her parents when her eyes were drawn to a large, sad-looking dog, tied to a post near a corner stall. The German Shepherd was clearly neglected. His fur was matted, his ribs visible, and the look in his eyes reflected an unspoken sadness. Emily, a sensitive child with a heart full of compassion, stopped in her tracks. "Mom, look at him," Emily said softly, her voice trembling with concern. Victoria, her mother, noticed the direction of her daughter's gaze and sighed. She knew that Emily had always been drawn to animals in need, especially those who were abandoned or unloved. "All right, sweetie, we'll take a look, but stay close to me," Victoria replied, giving a gentle smile to reassure her daughter. As they approached the dog, Emily crouched down a few feet away from him. She gazed at him with wide eyes, her heart aching for the poor creature. "Hi there, boy," she whispered, her tiny hand reaching out. The dog, with cautious curiosity, sniffed the air, his ears twitching ever so slightly in response. He didn't retreat from her touch, but rather leaned into it, his tail giving a faint wag. Victoria observed the scene closely, her eyes softening as she saw how the dog responded to her daughter. "Be careful, Emily," she cautioned, her voice laced with concern. He might be scared, but Emily didn't seem to notice the warning. Her attention was fixed on the dog, sensing that he was just as lonely and misunderstood as she felt at times. There was a vendor nearby, preoccupied with his customers, who seemed to be the owner of the dog. Emily stood up slowly and approached him. "Excuse me, sir," she asked politely. "Is this your dog?" The vendor glanced at her briefly and nodded. "He's no good," he said dismissively. "Nobody wants him. He's just taking up space here." Emily's heart sank at the coldness in his voice. "May I pet him?" she asked, her small hand trembling as she extended it to the dog. With a shrug, the vendor replied, "Do whatever you want." And so, Emily gently ran her fingers through the dog's fur. To her surprise, he didn't shy away. Instead, he leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly as if he were savoring the moment. Emily smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest as she realized that a bond was forming between them. The dog's name, she decided in that instant, would be Thor. Over the next few weeks, Emily and her parents returned to the market, and each time, she spent more time with Thor. With each visit, the connection between them grew stronger. Thor began to recognize Emily. His eyes would light up whenever he saw her, his tail wagging ever so slightly, a small but significant sign of his growing trust. But the more Emily got to know Thor, the more she realized the extent of his suffering. His ribs were still visible under his fur, and his behavior was often skittish. He was wary of sudden movements and loud noises, and whenever someone would try to pet him, he would flinch, as if anticipating pain. Emily's heart ached for him, but she knew that she couldn't let him stay in this state. He deserved more. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Emily turned to her parents with determination in her eyes. "I want to take Thor home," she said, her voice firm for someone so young. Victoria and John exchanged looks. They knew it wouldn't be easy. Thor needed medical care and lots of attention, but Emily was adamant. After much discussion, they approached the vendor with an offer to take Thor home. The vendor, eager to be rid of the useless dog, agreed without hesitation. And so, Emily gently unchained Thor, and together with her parents, they led him to their car. "You're coming home with us," Emily whispered softly to the dog, as they drove back to their house in San Francisco. As the car rolled through the streets, Emily sat close to Thor, her small hand gently petting him. Thor rested his head on her lap, a quiet gesture of trust and comfort. Little did Emily know, this was just the beginning of a remarkable journey. Thor, the dog who had been abandoned, was about to show her just how deep their bond would go. From a neglected, unloved creature at a bustling market, Thor was about to prove that even the most broken hearts could heal with love and patience. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but Emily's love and dedication to Thor would see them through. And as she held his head in her lap, she knew one thing for certain: Thor had found his family, and they would face whatever came next together. The first few weeks after bringing Thor home were filled with small but significant moments. At first, Thor was still skittish and cautious. He didn't quite trust his new surroundings, and every sudden movement made him flinch. The small house in San Francisco felt different to him, unfamiliar. Quiet, and safe, but he couldn't quite shake the memories of his troubled past. Emily spent every possible moment with him. She would sit next to him on the floor, reading her favorite books aloud, or simply talking to him about her day. She noticed how, at first, Thor would keep his distance. But as days passed, he began to show more signs of trust. When Emily would gently pet him, he would lean into her touch, and his tail would wag slightly. Slowly, very slowly, Thor was beginning to let go of the pain of his past. Victoria and John watched from the sidelines with a mixture of concern and admiration. They knew that Emily's love for animals ran deep, but they weren't sure how Thor would handle this drastic change. It wasn't just about giving him food and shelter, it was about healing his emotional scars. Scars that were far deeper than they had ever anticipated. One afternoon, Emily sat beside Thor, her small hand stroking his fur as she whispered softly, "It's okay, Thor, you're safe now. I'll never leave you." Victoria walked in and smiled softly, watching her daughter with the dog. "She has such a way with him, doesn't she?" she said to John. "Yes, she does," John replied, his voice filled with quiet pride. He had always known that Emily had a rare connection with animals. But this was different. Thor wasn't just any dog. He was a dog who had known pain, neglect, and fear. Yet, he was slowly finding peace with Emily by his side. But despite their best efforts, Thor's behavior wasn't always predictable. He had bad days when he would growl or snap, especially when he felt threatened or cornered. They knew that his past was still haunting him, and it was up to them to help him work through it. The family reached out to a local animal behaviorist, Dr. Louise Taylor, who specialized in working with traumatized dogs. Dr. Taylor came to their home and carefully observed Thor. She didn't seem surprised by his behavior but instead spoke with empathy. "This dog has been through a lot," she said, her voice soft but firm. "His behavior comes from the trauma he's experienced, and what he needs now is a stable, patient environment. You're doing the right thing by taking it slow." Victoria and John nodded, grateful for the expert guidance. They knew that Thor had been through much worse than they had ever realized, and it would take time to heal the emotional wounds. As the weeks passed, Emily and Thor continued their daily routines. She played with him in the yard, took him on walks around San Francisco, and made sure he felt loved and cared for. Her patience was boundless, even when Thor had setbacks. When he growled or cowered in fear, Emily was there for him, showing him that he was not alone. One day, while they were playing in the backyard, Emily threw a ball to Thor. To her surprise, he picked it up and trotted back to her with a wagging tail. It was the first time he had initiated play. Emily's heart soared with happiness as she threw the ball again, and Thor eagerly chased after it. From the porch, Victoria and John watched in silence, smiles spreading across their faces. Thor was improving. It wasn't a quick process, but they could see the progress. But just when things seemed to be going smoothly, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, while Emily and Thor were playing in the yard, a loud noise from the neighbor's cat startled Thor. The cat darted across the yard, sending Thor into a frenzy. He took off after the cat, barking wildly. Emily, caught up in the excitement, chased after him, her small legs struggling to keep up. In the chaos, Emily didn't see the approaching car speeding down the street. Victoria and John's hearts leapt into their throats as they saw Emily chasing Thor and the car coming closer. "Emily, stop!" Victoria shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the screeching of the car's tires and the frantic barking of the dog. Just when it seemed like everything would go horribly wrong, Thor's protective instincts kicked in. He saw the car speeding toward Emily and, without a moment's hesitation, darted back toward her. With a mighty leap, he pushed Emily out of the way, sending her tumbling safely to the grass just as the car screeched to a halt. The driver, pale with shock, stared at the scene, unable to believe what had just happened. Victoria and John rushed to Emily, who was dazed but unharmed. Thor stood over her, licking her face gently, as if to reassure her that she was safe. He had just saved her life. Tears welled up in Victoria's eyes as she hugged Emily tightly. John knelt beside Thor, his hand resting on the dog's head in silent gratitude. Thor had proven, in the most dramatic way, just how far their bond had come. He was no longer just a rescued dog with a troubled past, he was a protector, a loyal companion, and a beloved member of the family. From that day on, Thor was no longer just a rescue dog. He was part of Emily's family, willing to protect her with everything he had. The journey they had started together had only just begun, and Emily knew, without a doubt, that they would face the future side by side. As the months passed, the bond between Emily and Thor continued to strengthen. The little German Shepherd, once a sad, neglected dog at the market in San Francisco, was now a loyal and protective companion. Every day seemed to bring a new milestone, a new victory for the small family. Thor's playful behavior, once a distant hope, was now a regular part of their lives. He loved to chase the ball, run through the yard, and even let Emily teach him new tricks. The bond they shared was undeniable. But the peace that Emily had fought so hard to create was soon threatened by an unwelcome presence. One afternoon, as the family was out for a walk in Golden Gate Park, a familiar face appeared. It was the man who had once owned Thor. Emily froze when she saw him from a distance, standing near the entrance of the park. His eyes locked on her and Thor. The man's eyes narrowed as he spotted Thor, his former dog. Emily felt the tension in the air as Thor stiffened beside her, his growl barely audible. She could see the man's face twist with anger and resentment as he approached, and she instinctively tightened her grip on the leash. "That's my dog," the man sneered as he marched toward them. "I was the one who took care of him, and you had no right to take him away from me." Emily stood her ground, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel Thor's protective energy grow stronger as he positioned himself in front of her. Thor didn't make a sound, but his stance spoke volumes. Emily calmly replied, "Thor is my dog now. He's safe and loved here, and you can't take him back." The man scoffed and sneered. "He was my dog first. You have no idea how much he meant to me." He took a step closer, but Thor growled louder, warning the man to stay back. Emily knew that the confrontation wasn't going to end peacefully. She felt her resolve strengthening with every passing second. She wouldn't let anyone hurt Thor again. "I don't care what you think," Emily said, her voice steady and unwavering. "You didn't care for him. You neglected him. Thor deserves better, and I'm giving him a life he can be proud of." The man's expression turned ugly, and he took another step forward, raising his hand as if to threaten her. Thor's growl grew louder, and his eyes blazed with protective instinct. It was clear that Thor was ready to defend his family at all costs. Just as the tension seemed ready to explode, Victoria and John appeared in the distance, hurrying toward Emily. The man looked at them and then, with one last glance at Emily and Thor, muttered under his breath, "You'll regret this," before turning and walking away. Victoria and John immediately rushed to Emily's side, their concern etched on their faces. "Are you okay?" Victoria asked, her voice filled with worry. "I'm fine," Emily said, taking a deep breath. "But Thor was amazing. He protected me." Thor's tail wagged slightly, but he stayed close to Emily, as if guarding her from any further harm. John placed a hand on Thor's head, grateful for the dog's loyalty. "You did good, boy," he murmured. However, the encounter left a lasting mark on Emily. The threat from Thor's previous owner had shaken her, but she knew she couldn't back down. Thor had become an essential part of their family, and there was no way she was going to let him go. She discussed the situation with her parents that evening, and after much consideration, they decided to take action. They contacted a lawyer, Miss Patricia Patterson, who specialized in animal rights cases. Miss Patterson was a well-known lawyer in San Francisco, respected for her dedication to defending animals and their rights. She agreed to take on Thor's case and assured Emily's family that they had a solid chance of keeping Thor. Over the next few weeks, the family worked closely with Miss Patterson to gather evidence. They took photographs of Thor's condition when they first rescued him, his matted fur, his visible ribs, and his sad, fearful eyes. They collected veterinary records showing his health improvements and had neighbors and friends testify about Thor's progress. Emily even wrote a heartfelt letter to the court. "Thor is my best friend," she wrote. "He saved my life, and I love him so much. Please don't let anyone take him away from me." The legal process was long and stressful, but Emily and her parents knew they were doing the right thing. They continued to train Thor, working with a local agility club to develop his skills. Thor had shown such incredible progress that they knew he deserved to be more than just a rescued dog. He was a star, and his potential was limitless. But just when it seemed like things might be going their way, the previous owner's threats intensified. He began showing up at the park, yelling at Emily and Thor, claiming that the dogs still belonged to him. He even tried to intimidate Emily and her family by saying that he would take legal action if they didn't hand Thor over. Despite these threats, Emily remained strong, knowing that Thor had found his forever home. The battle was far from over, but the love and determination in her heart made her more resilient than ever. She wouldn't let anyone take Thor from her. The day of the court hearing finally arrived. Emily, Victoria, John, and Thor made their way to the courthouse in San Francisco, their hearts full of hope but also anxiety. The courtroom was filled with tension as Miss Patterson presented their case. She highlighted Thor's progress, his loving care, and the undeniable bond he shared with Emily. The judge listened carefully to the evidence, and the atmosphere was tense as the previous owner was given a chance to speak. He argued that Thor was his dog, that he had the right to reclaim him, but Miss Patterson countered with the proof of Thor's suffering under his care. After what felt like an eternity, the judge made his decision. Thor would remain with Emily and her family, where he was loved and cared for. It was a victory for Emily and Thor, a moment that solidified their place in each other's lives forever. The court ruling was a triumph for the family, but it was more than that. It was a symbol of love, determination, and the power of standing up for what is right. Thor was no longer a sad, neglected dog. He was a beloved family member, a protector, and a true friend. And as Emily and Thor walked out of the courthouse hand in paw, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, forever. The days following the court ruling were a whirlwind of emotions for Emily, Victoria, and John. The courtroom battle was over. But the victory wasn't just legal, it was personal. Thor, once a neglected dog with a troubled past, was now a beloved member of the family. His future was secured, and Emily knew that her promise to protect him was now stronger than ever. After the hearing, life returned to a semblance of normalcy. But it was a new normal. The bond between Emily and Thor was more profound than before. The dog, once wary of the world and fearful of humans, now walked confidently beside Emily wherever she went. His tail wagged in delight whenever he saw her, and the sparkle in his eyes told a story of transformation and love. One day, Emily, Victoria, and John decided to take Thor for a special outing. It had been months since the court case was settled, and they all felt that it was time to celebrate Thor's new life. They packed up the car and drove to Marin County, a beautiful area just north of San Francisco, known for its vast open spaces and scenic views. Thor had never been on a long road trip before, and Emily was excited to see how he would react to the adventure. As they arrived at a park surrounded by rolling hills, Emily eagerly opened the car door. Thor stepped out, sniffing the air and taking in the new scents. His ears perked up at the sound of birds chirping, and he wagged his tail in excitement. Emily threw a ball across the open field, and Thor raced after it, his powerful legs carrying him with ease. He had come so far from the scared dog that had first entered their lives at the market. Now, he was a playful, energetic companion, eager to explore the world with the people who loved him. Victoria and John watched from a distance as Emily and Thor played. It was a moment of pure joy, one that they had worked hard to create. As the family gathered on a blanket for a picnic, they shared stories of their journey, how they had fought for Thor, how they had overcome challenges, and how their lives had changed for the better. Victoria smiled at Emily, proud of her daughter's determination and compassion. Thor is truly a part of this family now, John said, his voice filled with pride. We've come so far together. As the sun began to set over the hills of Marin County, the family packed up their things and prepared to head home. The day had been perfect, a celebration of everything they had overcome. Thor was tired from all the running and playing, but as he climbed into the backseat of the car, he curled up next to Emily, resting his head on her lap. Emily gently stroked his fur, her heart full of gratitude for the dog who had become so much more than a pet. He was her friend, her protector, and her family. Later that evening, as they returned home to San Francisco, Emily sat on the porch with Thor by her side. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but all she could focus on was the dog resting beside her. It had been a long road, but they had made it. The love and care that Emily had given to Thor had transformed his life, just as his presence had transformed hers. One day, while Emily was at school, she received an unexpected call. It was Miss Patricia Patterson, the lawyer who had helped them through the court case. She had some news to share, news that would bring even more joy into their lives. "Emily, I wanted to let you know that there's been a development. The previous owner of Thor, the one who had mistreated him, is facing charges for animal abuse," Miss Patterson said over the phone. "It seems that the authorities have uncovered even more evidence of his cruelty, and they're pursuing a criminal case against him." Emily's heart swelled with relief. The man who had once threatened to take Thor from her was now facing the consequences of his actions. Thor would never have to fear him again. "That's great news," Emily replied, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm just glad Thor is safe now." Miss Patterson continued, "You've done an amazing thing for Thor. I hope you know how much your love and care have made a difference in his life." The phone call left Emily with a sense of peace and satisfaction. The fight was over, and justice had been served. Thor was finally free to live the life he deserved, one filled with love, joy, and security. As Emily hung up the phone, she looked out the window at Thor, who was lounging in the sun, enjoying the warmth of the afternoon. He had come so far, and so had she. Together, they had overcome adversity and formed a bond that no one could break. Thor was no longer the neglected dog at the market. He was a cherished member of the family, and Emily knew that she would always protect him, just as he had protected her. The story of Emily and Thor was one of love, perseverance, and the incredible power of compassion. It was a reminder that even in the face of hardship, there is always hope. With a little love and determination, miracles can happen, and lives can be changed for the better. As Emily and Thor settled down for the night, the world outside seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, a girl and her dog, who had found each other when they needed it most. And together, they knew that their journey had only just begun.